Thank you for joining us here at Emissions Reduction Alberta's Carbon Copy. In the spirit of reconciliation, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge that we have the privilege of living, working, and investing in behalf of the province of Alberta on the traditional territories, which include Treaty 6, Treaty 7, and Treaty 8 nations. Métis Nations, Regions 3 and 4, Inuit, and all others who live and care for these lands. My name is Isabella, and I'm the Manager of Strategic Initiatives and Programs at Emissions Reduction Alberta, part of ERA's Strategy and Performance team. Today, I have the lovely opportunity to sit down with three amazing leaders, each of whom are meaningfully contributing to the energy system transformation. So much so that all three were profiled in Pembina Institute's and Globe Series Women in Energy Transformation series, which, for those who are unfamiliar, is a national dialogue celebrating women who are advancing Canada's transition to a clean economy. According to the World Economic Forum 2022 Global Gender Gap Report, even though North America is the most advanced region when it comes to closing the gender gap and achieving gender parity, researchers estimate it will still take 59 years to close this gap. The report also mentions that while some industries have reached near gender parity in leadership roles globally, others, such as the energy industry, is only seeing 20% of women hired into these leadership roles. Today's discussion will focus on how each of these leaders came to be involved in their roles, some of the barriers that exist for women, and solutions to enhance participation and leadership as we work to reach net zero targets by 2050. And with that, I will pass it along to each of our panelists to introduce themselves, starting with Vanessa.
Thank you, Isabella. My name is Vanessa White. I am the Director of Renewable and Alternative Energy at Alberta Innovates, and I am the mother of two wonderful young teenage boys.
Thanks, Isabella, for that great introduction. My name is Heather Stevens. I am the Chief Operating Officer of Emissions Reduction Alberta. I've had the luxury of being with the organization since inception in 2009 and growing it to what is now almost $1 billion of funding. I am the mother of two teenage daughters who I know are relying on our commitment to the energy transition. So I'm grateful for the opportunity to have the discussion today.
Thanks, Isabella, and thank you, esteemed panelists, for the introduction. My name is Anna Maria Radu, and I'm a senior manager at TC Energy, also a proud mother of three daughters, and have an equally vested interest in getting the energy transition right for the future generations. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you all for that wonderful introduction. So we have illustrious leaders with us, and as you all know, women are currently underrepresented, both as workers and leaders in the energy transition, in the energy economy, and in other industries that will help us make net zero a reality. Can you tell me why you chose to get involved in clean tech and why this industry is important to you? I'll start with you, Vanessa.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, Isabella. What I find is actually women are most underrepresented in more traditional energy industries. And that what I find in the clean energy industry is that we actually have slightly better representation, still substantially underrepresented, but I think that there's this draw into the clean energy sector where women can feel like instead of just being a sailor on the ship, that they can actually be the captain of their own yacht. And that I think there's so many more opportunities in clean energy than there is in more traditional energy, and that's why you're starting to see this bit of a larger representation of women in the clean energy space.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think for me, I came in a non-technical background. I'm an accountant, so I came with my skills as a chartered professional accountant, and what I would say is for me, there is this desire and attraction to a mandate of an organization to feel like I'm making a difference, and I think you see that in the clean tech sector where your impact is very obvious, and so I find that's very attractive. And what I would say is clean tech needs everybody. It's not going to just need technical experts. It's going to need everybody across the board, and what you need is passion, and you need to be excited, and you need to have this commitment and drive. But there's no one size fits all for who looks and feels like clean tech. So come join us. I liked being a captain of a yacht. That was great.
Yeah, so the nexus for me, the nexus I have with clean tech is via climate policy, which happens to be my passion. I was privileged enough to be able to pursue my graduate education here in Canada at University of Calgary, and while working on my energy, natural resources, and environmental law master's degree, I was inspired by some wonderful individuals. And was always fascinated by how policy and could be the driver behind energy transition and could mobilize not only financial markets but also the corporate entities, the society as a whole, to enact on energy transition. So after a short period of time in academia, I realized that if I wanted to make a difference, I had to step into the energy sector. And energy is vital to everything we're doing. Energy is a key vehicle in addressing climate action, which is what brought me to TC Energy. And fast forward 10 years into my career, to be able to work at an organization that puts equal importance on climate policy, on investments in clean tech, in positioning for energy transition, in responding to the societal needs. That's very powerful and very inspirational to me, and I feel definitely privileged to be where I am today. And I completely agree with Heather and Vanessa. We need all hands on deck. We need everyone at the table, and I think part of our mandate is to encourage that participation, diverse participation. Energy transition is going to require that creativity and diversity at the table.
And so each of you are in different roles in the energy transition space, from policy to finance to operations to technical space. What would you like to see in a successful energy transition? What does it look like to you, and how do you envision your teams working towards that?
Awesome, great question. For me, successful energy transition is really around taking the resources that we have, whether they're the renewables or the non-renewables, and getting the most benefit out of them, right? And so it's around finding the right diverse energy mix and getting positioning ourselves for sustainability through making the best use of each of the materials that we have. And so where that is we're looking to grow, I think, as a society in terms of science and medicine. And so what materials do we need? What energy do we need? How can we have those energy resources to be able to support the lifestyle that we want for society on a whole? And then finding the right source that fits with those needs. And so when we look at it overall, it's really around that balance and that diversity of having the right fit for the right piece. And this is where my engineering background and my Star Trek nerd is. Just imagine 23rd century Star Trek, and that for me is really where I would love to see our energy transition move towards.
I love it. I don't know that I have the right vision of Star Trek that maybe you do, but I love it. I totally agree. And when you think about those resources, and then what's the backbone that we're going to need to be able to make that happen? And for me, when I think about what we want is healthier, stronger, more resilient communities. We want an engaged workforce that is innovative and adaptable. And I think underpinning all of that really is that organizations need to embed innovation, sustainability practices all the way through their organization. They need it in their processes, they need it in their policies, they need it in their human resource activities, they need it in their governance structure. And once those companies have that embedded, it's just a part of what we do. It becomes the fabric of our organizations. Then these things are possible. You can take those resources, you can get the most out of them, you can get the most out of your people. They feel valued and engaged, and I think the excitement comes when companies are really firing on all cylinders and embed it all in. So I hope that's the future I see before I'm finished, before I hang up my abacus on the wall.
I'm going to focus a little bit on the way we transition rather than the objective, which, by the way, it's a bit of a moving target, right? As we develop these solutions, whether they're technological or financial mechanisms, you name it. The objective is to get to net zero. However, the energy mix, the portfolio of solutions may look different than what we envision today. So this is why I like to put a little bit of an emphasis on the way we transition to net zero. It is important, and certainly I'm very encouraged to see that the policymakers, governments, corporate entities, they all come together and they start crafting all these goals and aspirations. But as we move onto implementation and discovering those solutions, I think it's important to remain collaborative, to ensure we're not locking ourselves in a corner, that we're not eliminating any opportunities, that we are not leaving anyone behind, that we're inclusive, that we invite opinions from all the stakeholders. And also making sure we balance some key priorities: energy security, affordability, reliability of our energy sources is vital in order to enable that growth and successful transition.
And if I can just pick up on that, I totally agree with you. And I think what we don't want is unintended consequences of disproportionate impact to jurisdictions that have contributed the least to climate change. And part of that, I always say we're not solving Alberta's problem, we're not solving even Canada's problem, it's a global problem. And I think breaking down those barriers and knowledge sharing, making sure that we're telling the stories widely, that technologies are shared amongst jurisdictions, and we're seeing that a lot already happening with Net Zero Alliance and people realizing let's not keep this to ourselves. This has to be shared, and shout from the rooftop when you find a great solution, because it's not one solution, it's not one silver bullet, it's going to need everything. Back to all hands on deck, it needs all technologies on deck too. So.
Yeah, and I'd love to pull in another thread of Anna's comments, and that's around the no one left behind, right? It's around we need to make sure that we've got the systems in place to help upskill or reskill, the staff that are in some of these more traditional energy industries as they move into a cleaner energy industry, so that those individuals can continue to be contributors, right, moving forward. And so I think that that's the other piece that we really have to focus on, that, while there's a lot of effort that we're putting into technology, there really needs to be that same effort in terms of the human side of the resource pyramid, right?
And I would like to touch on the all hands on deck approach. The energy transition is an all hands on deck approach. We want to make sure we're not leaving anyone behind. However, there are barriers to transitioning for some communities. There are barriers to participation of some communities in the energy transition. And, coming back to the focus of why we're here today and showcasing wonderful women leaders like yourselves, the Pembina Institute released a report in 2021, Women in Alberta's Energy Transition Report, that stated there are 5 barriers that they found for women to participate and to lead in some of these positions. Lack of access to opportunity, lack of good jobs, inability to advance, an income gap, and industry culture. Is there anything that any of you have faced in your careers, moving to where you are today? And do you still see this as a problem, one or more of these challenges?
From where I see, much of my career was in the traditional energy industry. I spent over 20 years in oil and gas before moving over to the clean tech industry, and I guess that's where I look at it now is, there were a lot more barriers in that environment than what I'm seeing in the clean energy space. And but even through all of that, the number one piece of the puzzle for me in terms of my success in that industry and my success today is around the fact of having that partner or that support network that allows you to really really succeed when you need to. And you know, I'm incredibly fortunate. My husband of 28 years, we've been partners in this journey together. And you know, at times where my career needed more energy, more emphasis, you know, he took that balance. He stepped back a little bit. He spent more time taking, you know, responsibility for the home and the more personal side of things to allow me to take those steps in my career, right? And you know, I appreciate how fortunate I am in that. I don't believe that everyone has that opportunity to have that partner, but the underlying pieces is finding that support, and that I think is one of the biggest barriers for women to succeed, is that support network needs to be there.
Yeah, and I love that. The home personal support network is fundamental. I would say for me, what was pivotal was the support and flexibility I got from my leaders. And so I've actually spent a very long career never working for a female, but I have had incredible male leaders that have been champions, flexibility and understanding the value that I could bring to a team, but understanding that my priorities changed. So I had children at that time when they were young. I had to shift my focus, and I wanted to shift my focus to spend a bit more time at home. And I decided to take a step back. I worked 50% time when my kids were little, but I had a leader that understood that he was in the long game. This was a long-term relationship, that he could get more value out of me probably in my 50% than he would if I showed up every day and was worried about what was happening at home. And so I think, you know, what we need to do is normalize this. What I don't want this to be is that's just my story. I want this to be pervasive in organizations, that we think about adaptability and flexibility and investment in our teams for the long run. Even if they're not going to be your team member forever, you're investing in industry and making sure that women are successful leaders in the long run. And it's a win-win scenario. Employers get happier, more productive and loyal employees, and employees get to feel valued and secure, and they get to feel like there isn't this guilt and tension constantly of a decision to make about where they ought to be and when. And that's not everyone's story. Not everybody wants to maybe take a step back in the way that I did, but what I want to do is make sure that this becomes a conversation that's always open and transparent. I think unconscious bias exists everywhere. We just had a great session last week with someone telling us of the 17 different unconscious biases there are. And so what I think is most important is just talking about it openly. It's hard conversations. It's okay to say we didn't quite get this right, or we're not going to say the right things or do the right things, but showing up, being authentic, and having the conversations, I think, go a long way for people to see something else is possible. So.
Yeah, I would like to add to that yet another layer of complexity from my personal experience. So I started my career here in Canada in a new country. Well, everything was very overwhelming. I was also raising my twin daughters at the time, and that was difficult. But that also gave me a degree of resilience and a sense of motivation that helped me push through those barriers. And you're absolutely right. Like, underrepresentation is and was probably 10 years ago even more evident in those rooms, in the meeting rooms, when you're looking around and you're the only woman, yet alone, or someone with an accent in the room. So that, to me, pushed me to be, you know, extra self-aware, shyer maybe than I should have been. But I also realized that in order to maybe break that unconscious bias, I had to open up a little bit more, to push myself outside of my comfort zone, to speak my mind, to offer opinions. And I was encouraged by some extraordinary leaders to do so. So when it comes to breaking those barriers, going back to your question, Isabella, I think we need to differentiate between the organizational barriers that exist in the industry or in any organization for that matter, and personal barriers. I think women are very hard on themselves. We tend to raise our own barriers. We're caregivers. We love to devote our time and attention to family, and that's a great thing. But that puts extra pressure on us. So we just have to be mindful, take the time to self-reflect, and be comfortable enough to ask for that, to take a step back, right, at work, to ask for that flexibility, and recognize when you're pushing the limits. Now, from an organizational standpoint, I think we need to be more purposeful in setting our goals. Like, for instance, TC Energy has committed to have at least 40% of a leader position in our corporate locations be filled by women. I think it's great. And we have an inclusion and diversity action plan and a pathway to reach our goal. So I think that's great. I think it sets an example. It's extremely motivating for people. But it's also about creating a culture within the organization, ensuring that you have a safe space where you can challenge the unconscious bias, where you can have those difficult conversations, where you feel comfortable to request that flexibility. So it's a package, right? And actions on multiple fronts are required to eliminate those barriers. And then for the person who may be subject to that unconscious bias, I would offer, don't be afraid to open up a conversation. Don't be afraid to ask for feedback. It's a great window to kind of break that glass ceiling and turn those negative perceptions into something that's positive. And that would eventually, help you and the counterparts go over the unconscious bias.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I would say it's also a responsibility of existing female leaders to tell their stories, to tell personal stories about where they were and where they are now, so that people can see themselves, they can understand, oh gosh, they're dealing with the same things I'm dealing with. Maybe we just hide it better, or we get used to putting it off, but it's important that they see themselves, that they feel the same way, they feel validated in a way, because I think that was missing. I started a little longer than 10 years ago, it was 25 years ago, and it was a different workforce. It was a workforce where I didn't see myself in the leaders ahead of me, and it was hard. You had to look for other avenues to get that validation that you weren't insane, that people felt the same way that you did in the workforce. And I think that's really, really important for us to, as female leaders, to show up for others in our organization, to have those conversations, start them, because it's hard. It's hard when you're starting out. You think, oh gosh, what's the next opportunity, or I have to be perfect, or I have to be on all the time, and that's just not the reality, and you only get that with experience and with realizing there'll be something else, there will be other opportunities. Be kind to ourselves, be patient with ourselves, but that's hard to do sometimes. So
yeah, you had a couple of great comments in there, Heather, that I'd love to address. And the first one around having male leaders for your entire career, right? And I've been in that same situation, right? I've only now am in a position where I have a female leader, and what a change. But not saying anything negative against the male leaders that I've had. They had helped me progress throughout my career, and they've been incredibly supportive. But there is a difference in terms of seeing that woman the next step ahead of you, and having someone who's been in your shoes helping pull you up. But yeah, when you think about the opportunities or the kind of support networks that I think anyone entering the energy industry, or probably any industry, a woman entering in those industries, they really need kind of, when I look at it, 3 tiers of support, right? The first one is that supportive network of your peers, the people you can talk to, you can be vulnerable with, you can have those conversations with. You then need that next level, which are those mentors. Who are those people you can look up to, who can help guide you in terms of how to progress, what are your opportunities, help you see a bit different perspective. And then you ultimately need those sponsors. those individuals who are really going to stand up for you and say, this is a person that we need to find that opportunity, move them forward, move their career, really help them excel. And so if you can have those three, you're well set for that progress. And unfortunately, I think it's harder for women to find. We're really good at finding that support network with our peers. Not necessarily as good at being able to find those mentors and those sponsors. And so those, I think, are some of the big gaps that we need to really look at.
I would like to build on that, Vanessa. I think you made some really great comments in there. The foundation upon which we build those three tiers, and you touched on this earlier, is the family, the support you get from friends and family, personal life. It's so important to have that balance between personal life and work life. Only when those two work in balance, we can be, the best of ourselves at work and at home. And the other thing I would like to build on was your comment around, women not maybe being as great at self-promoting. I think this is where, again, speaking from personal experience, this is where I feel we should be our own advocates as well. I don't want to generalize it to the entire gender here, but I, for one, tend to kind of let my work speak for itself, and that is not always the fastest way to being recognized. So yeah, word of encouragement for young women would be just to humbly self-promote and put themselves out there. It's important.
No, absolutely, and that's one of the piece of advice that I hope we can kind of get out today, right? And in my experience as well, right? Early in my career, and apparently I was earlier in my career than even Heather. So, but it was that thing where I needed to know, or I felt at the time that I needed to conform, right? And my absolute favorite quote, and it wasn't one that really sunk in and embedded itself in terms of how I present myself moving forward, is that, Dr. Seuss, why fit in when you were born to stand out, right? And I found very early in the traditional energy industry that I felt I needed to conform a little bit, and it's only probably in the last 10 or 15 years that I've really decided that no, it should be me, and I should be able to show my authentic self when I'm at work, and I don't need to try to hide or be a little less of me to be able to fit in. And so I think that that's one thing that we really can work towards, especially for young women entering energy industries or entering any industry, is accept who you are and be your authentic self, and don't feel like you have to hide parts of yourself as you're working in your career, because I think all that does is hold us back.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I mean, you guys have made exceptional points, and I think the one around the diversity of mentorship, sort of your tiers of support that you need, mentors can be anywhere, and I think we forget that they can be in your personal life, in some extracurricular activity you have or your kids have, or they can be in your workplace, they can be outside of your own workplace. And I think for women, it comes back to what you're saying about we're just a little different, we're built a little different, we feel a little different, and even within the gender, there's great diversity. And so I think it's okay to say, I don't have time for maybe what looks and feels like a normal mentorship or networking relationship, but let it organically happen. And sometimes those informal, organic relationships are more important than some of the formal networking, coaching, mentoring that might happen within your organization or a networking organization or women groups that are fundamental and really important to drive change. But we also have to fit them into our regular lives, which can be busy. We have all got children sitting in this panel, and I was at 2 dance competitions and a music festival and a ringette tournament this weekend, so it can be very busy to fit in what maybe looks and feels like this box. So again, fit it into how we work and how we live.
It's great to see that you all have children and have families, And as a younger professional, earlier on in my career, I don't have children yet. And I think that's one of the things that's kind of crossed my mind is, for a number of different reasons, I don't have children. One of them being oftentimes younger generations are having to choose between having children and having a career and moving up in industries. Is that something that is still prevalent today? And have you had to work through those challenges? And was that something that ever crossed your mind? And did you find it hard to come back after having children?
Thank you for that question, Isabella. You might have noticed I became a little bit emotional as you were going through that. It is a very personal choice. And the timing, how you prioritize in life, it is everyone's prerogative. In my situation, and I can only speak from my perspective, I became a mom before launching my professional career. It happened actually while I was still a graduate student, and it wasn't the easiest period of my life, but it was, oddly enough, one of the most rewarding. I was extremely sleep deprived, figuring out what motherhood is, and double duty there with the twins, and while in the background I was still thinking about my research question. So I figured after going through that I can tackle on everything. I then stepped into academia, and then in the energy sector, and that was challenging because my children were very young and still demanded a lot of my attention. And when I had my third, I was well into my career there, and at TC, and I was a little bit concerned. The company was going through some form of business transformation. I wasn't sure what the organization is going to look like when I come back from mat leave, and I actually returned a little bit early because of that. I wanted to show that form of commitment to the company. In hindsight, it's probably not the wisest choice I made. I was so sleep deprived. My third child proved to be a very difficult sleeper, so I was very, very sleep deprived in those 3-4 months after coming back. And it should, I guess, one word of wisdom that I have, self-reflect on your priorities, make that decision when it feels right for you, your personal circumstances, and know that work will always be there. And you have the opportunity in life and throughout the career to kind of restore that balance and build up. But yeah, for me, it was never a choice. I wanted to be a mom more than anything else.
Yeah, I love your advice. I think that the messages are about make your personal choice because it's your personal journey and your story. And not surprisingly, all three of us probably have a very different story of how we got to where we are. And I think that the big thing for me would be recognizing that it's okay to be patient. It's okay to make your own choice that looks and feels a little different than someone else's. So my journey was a little different, and we need to tell these stories so that then people can see, oh, that's a little bit like how I look and feel, and this one looks like me, because you sound incredible, like you're Superwoman doing a master's and raising twins, and so that people need to see that story reflected back in them if they're in that situation, because the life path is not set out when we're 8. I didn't say I'm going to be a chief operating officer at a cleantech company when I was 8, for sure. So it twists and turns all the way. So my story was a little different. I was probably 10 years into my career when I met my partner, and I was living abroad in the UK, and had no cares in the worried world. I didn't own a property, I didn't own a car. I just traveled and did what I wanted and was very selfish, and it was lovely. And then we got married, returned, and so I was sort of not quite at the midway of where I am now, but I was a different kind of professional. I was probably a bit more confident. I was a bit more understanding that there were other opportunities that would probably come my way. So when I had my children, I did maybe a little bit of a different scenario where I said, you know what, this is my priority right now. I'm going to take my full mat leave and then a little bit extra. And if you would like me to return, I would love to return and contribute, but it's going to look and feel differently. And I'm going to give you what I would like to give you, which is half of my time for a period of time. And I did that for about 10 years of my career, as I took that different prioritization and flexibility. But I was so lucky that I had these incredible champions and incredible people around me that let that happen, recognized the value and the long game. I think I talked about that earlier. So what's important, that we tell these stories, that we normalize those decisions, that we show up as leaders and say, those are important decisions for you to make, and I support you in those decisions. And the more we talk about it, the more people realize it's not a scary thing to ask for, to say, I love what I do professionally, but I also love being a parent. And it shouldn't be, to your question, Isabella, I would love everybody who, you know, if that's a pathway they want to go down, that we do everything to support them in getting there. So,
Thank you, Heather.
Yeah, and my story is yet different again, as Heather had suggested. You know, the pressure around having to choose was one that I personally felt as an engineer in a primarily male-dominated career. You know, I also was, you know, well 10 years into my career before I had my first child, and that was because there was this external pressure and probably internal pressure as well of, you know, I need to get to a certain point in my career. I need to get my PEng. I want to get to that first leadership position so that I then am in a position where I can come back and I can set myself up for success. And even doing all of that, it didn't necessarily work. I went on my first mat leave, and when I came back, the organization wanted to put me in a position working for the individual who replaced me when I left on my mat leave. So then I was in a situation of, well, that's not really a good fit for me. I don't want to do that. And so I had to find another position for myself within the organization when I was coming back. So there I was on mat leave, dealing with a child at home and trying to figure out where I wanted to be. And so, you know, there's very good stories of, you know, fabulous champions and organizations that would support you. And there also are those ones where you kind of have to pave your own way. And unfortunately, I had to do that in my career. I think that through all of that, I found my way into good positions where I could contribute and I felt valued. But there was definitely a lot of distress, anxiety that kind of all came with having to do that I didn't have that champion that was looking after me when I went through that position. Not that I would give up that choice. Love the dual jobs that I have of parent and engineer, but yeah, there definitely were a few hiccups in my road.
And it came at a time when, let's be honest, it's fundamental change in who you are. You're raising a little person and you're emotional and you're changing and adapting to this new life you have, and the added stress, as you say, of where am I going to work, who am I going to work for, what am I going to do, is something that we can't burden young people with. And you know, to your point, Isabella, it's not just a female issue. We were talking about this when we had a bit of a break, to say it's also the men who are choosing to have families. We have to support them in their decisions, and it might be that they're the ones that want to take a step back, that they're the ones that want to take the paternity leave that's available to them. And I think as organizations, it's our obligation to show that this is all possible, that it's normalized, that we support each person in their decision, or the decision not to have children, but there's different opportunities that are available to those people as well. So it's about being supportive of pathways no matter what. I think that's really fundamental.
I think it's recognizing the diversity between all of us, and that we have to allow individuals to represent their own personal choices. And it might not, as leaders, it might not be the choice we want to make, but we need to support our staff in terms of and how they want to drive their careers.
Going back to the point I made earlier, it's about having that balance between the work life and the personal life, and enabling that, our staff to flourish on a personal level, giving them the flexibility. It is essential, so then they can also put their, full capacity and and demonstrate their full potential at work. I think that's what empowers staff, and that's definitely what has empowered me throughout my career.
Amazing. That's very helpful. And I love the notion that a career is not linear. We all work in innovation one way or another, and innovation, we all know, is not linear either. And, thinking back to a time when, either you were in school or you could give some advice to others who are starting their careers in STEM, what would that one piece of advice be?
One piece of advice. That's a great question. For me, it's around what do you want your career to be, and what will make you love what you're doing. And so that one piece of advice probably is 3 pieces if I look at it.
You're allowed to have
One
3.
is I can give 3. Awesome.
Yeah.
They all tie together and they create a nice little package. The first one is absolutely find out what it is that you love to do, and find a position and a career that lets you do what you love to do. The second one is find that job or that career with a group of people that you love to work with, because you spend 8 hours of your 24 hours of every day, except weekends, thank goodness, with those people, right? And so, you need to make sure that you like the people that you work with. And then the third one is, again, coming back to some of the other themes that we've already talked about. Make sure you have those leaders, those champions, those mentors that are there to support you. And I think if you can have those 3, bring together that trifecta, that you can be successful in absolutely anything that you want to do.
Thank you.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, it's hard to follow that because that's exceptional advice and covered all the bases. I would say, to your point, Isabella, about not being linear, I'm a perfect example of that I've come into clean tech, I feel, in a side door, not in an elevator. And I would say be open to those opportunities. They do come, and so I think it's easy to panic earlier in your career and think, oh gosh, I'm not going to get this next opportunity, or there's not going to be a better job than this one, or I don't want to quit this job, which is maybe not what I love doing, or it's got elements of it that are not great for me as a person or a professional, but I'm worried there isn't anything better out there. Just be open to adapting, being flexible with your skill set. That I think I said it before, clean tech needs everybody from all walks of life, and so particularly think about how can I just get myself the best set of skills that I can be valuable to all kinds of organizations, all kinds of different mandates, all kinds of different twists and turns, because you are valuable. You need to show up with passion, with authenticity, and with a commitment to making the world a better place, and then you'll fly.
Now it's even harder to follow. But I'll attempt. So building on the authenticity, 100% agree. Be yourself, be authentic, stay true to your values, stay true to your passion. I think that's an advice I often give to my daughters as well. Find something you're passionate about, and then you're going to excel at it. The other thing I would advise young women starting a career in clean tech, STEM, energy transition would be persevere. You're not going to get it from the first try, but don't abandon ship. Back to the theme, the metaphor that we used earlier. And also, don't be afraid of the unknown. Sometimes approaching unknown with humility, with dose of curiosity and optimism, you may be even surprised of what you're able to accomplish or the strengths you discover in yourself. And if that unknown may result in a failure, don't be afraid of failure. Build upon that, draw the lessons learned. And I would also say reach out, build that network. You've heard from my esteemed panel members, we're all available. You know where to find us. Reach out for that advice. It is extremely important to be comfortable to ask for help or advice, or if you don't know where to start, we're here. So that sums it up for me.
No, and that's great. And I think I just want to touch on the, if you don't think that a position is necessarily within your chosen career path or within that, idea that you have laid out for the next 5 years, still take it, because you can learn anything in all opportunities. And an example of this was when I had first come out of graduate school. I took a job with Statistics Canada, but it was working with Indigenous communities on the census. Now, it was a very short opportunity, but I learned the most, and it was one of the best opportunities that I had ever gotten. I learned and I listened, and you never know what opportunities will surprise you. So that is one that really stuck out for me, and I'm sure everyone has something like that where it was something a little bit different than they had envisioned, but still very, very meaningful. We talk about the journey, and we talk about how everyone's journey is a little bit different, and we talk about how you need that support group, you need those layers of support, changing your perspective when you come to an organization versus personal life, and finding that balance between both. And I think it's great to hear that it is a journey, and we are all still on that journey. And we've had quotes from Dr. Seuss, we've had quotes from Star Wars and references to others, but I would like to add an adapted quote from J.R.R. Tolkien's Lord of the Rings, actually, where you can step out your front door, and if you don't keep your feet, who knows where you'll be swept off to. And I think it's an important quote to me, at least, because it is that journey, and you'll be going on that journey, and how you get to the end almost doesn't matter, going back to what we said initially. It's that journey. And I think if there was one thing that you are all excited about in the near term, and then we'll maybe leave it at that, what would that be? What are you most excited about in the coming year? Wow.
That one is definitely a good question. I'm not sure if I want to start on that one. What am I excited about in the next year? So it's hard to decide, right? There's so many things that are going on, and again, we've talked about it in the work balance, the life balance, kind of what things are exciting us in a number of different things. And from a work perspective, I've got an absolutely fabulous initiative that I'm working on, and just so excited to see that coming into fruition. And so on that side of things, looking at bringing together a group of individuals to start looking at the opportunity really to have small modular nuclear reactors here in Alberta. And so that is definitely my passion project that I'm working on at work right now. On the home front, again, my children are getting older. My oldest son is going to be done grade 11 this year, and this will be probably our last big family vacation. And so we're actually heading over to Japan for the summer, and looking very forward to that, but yet also very anxious about it, because none of us speak a single word of Japanese, and it's that exploring a brand new culture, and I think that, you know, we touched on it from a business perspective throughout the conversation here, that, you know, get those different experiences so that you can differentiate yourself, and for me, it's a huge step outside of my comfort zone to go and experience another culture that is so different from ours, and so really excited about that and about stretching myself to really have that opportunity and that exposure.
Excellent. I like the indulgence of the work and the personal, so I'll do the same. On the work front, I think there's a couple things that excite me. One is that I don't actually know what's going to happen in a whole 12 months. So that keeps me excited, because I do feel like we've got a lot of, just curveballs thrown our way, and I think that's what keeps me excited and passionate. But equally, what excites me is that we have an amazing team. We've grown exponentially over the last couple of years. We've just hired some incredible people, augmented by the existing people like Isabella, who've been around for years, and this opportunity to do some things that we haven't been able to do because of bandwidth or, you know, different priorities. And so I'm just really excited to see what the team's going to come up with that is furthering and advancing technologies and spending money on clean tech. And I think there's never been a more pivotal time to embrace the earth and our role in it. So I'm excited about that. On the personal front, I'm equally doing I'm taking a mini career break in the summer. I was 25 years working in January, and I decided I needed to get off the treadmill for a minute. And so I'm taking my daughters to Europe for the summer. So not quite as maybe outside of my comfort zone from a culture or language perspective, although I don't speak much French, Italian, or Danish or Norwegian, so I guess it is out of my comfort zone as well. But just taking that moment to invest in myself and invest in my family, I've really prioritized that for this year. So I'm very much looking forward to taking a bit of a slowdown and spending that time being maybe a bit reflective, which we don't get the luxury of doing at times.
So inspirational. So I'm going to tackle this question the same way both of you did. On the work front, it's all about the journey, and when I embark in a new position, and I'm in relatively a new position at TC, I like to make it my own, and so it's really exciting to see what that space looks like now that I'm responsible for the enterprise-wide climate policy developments, and we have operations across North America. And so there's a lot of movement in the climate policy space right now, not only in Canada, but also very excited to see developments in the United States with the Inflation Reduction Act, as well as some state-level carbon pricing policy. So Washington State, New York just announced as well cap and invest. So very, very exciting from that perspective. And obviously Mexico stepping up their cap and trade program from the pilot phase. We are also working on several projects at TC, and so really excited to see what that next big investment in that clean tech decarbonization space is going to look like. We certainly have many irons in the fire, so that's what keeps me motivated every day there. On a personal front, we're looking forward to camping this summer. We took a break from camping, and now we decided we're fully committed to it again. It's a great opportunity to bond with the children, to create those precious memories. So looking forward to enjoying nature here in Alberta.
Amazing. Well, thank you, panelists. This has been fantastic. You've all given us some great insights, great feedback on each of your journeys, and they will continue, and I can't wait to do this again in another 5 or 10 years to see where we all are, and yeah, check out our other Carbon Copy podcasts to learn more about our projects and about what ERA is doing. But for sure, check out Alberta Innovates and TC Energy. All of us have some exciting projects, exciting initiatives on the go. And thank you all again for your time. This was fantastic, and congratulations on being profiled as some of the leaders in the space in moving the energy transition forward.
Thank you,
Thank
Isabella.
you so much,
Isabella.
Isabella.
Yeah,
And thank you, Emissions Reduction Alberta, for promoting this dialogue.